We are living in a fast and safe world where reading is going out of fashion. The result is a debasing ignorance that is combined with wealth and comfort. The poor man is limited by misery, while the wealthy have so many possibilities that they do not even know what to do. Mostly they seek pleasure, because this is the easiest, without being aware that this can become very repetitive and boring. The poor could not transform their suffering into power, while the rich do not know for what they can use their wealth. The former considers reading a luxury, while the latter thinks that they don't need it at all. This wasn't always the case. Our relationship to reading was always in change. At the beginning, we used stone and clay. Then we wrote on skins and paper. At the end of the Middle Ages, Gutenberg invented printing. Thus, books could reach more people than ever. At the end of the 20th century, the internet and digital technologies have opened a new era in reading. They made available all kinds of books and texts, but they also made harder for us to find value. Technologies which have revolutionized our life also created undesirable effects. Our world became vibratory and brutally fast, while our attention is dispersed. We are trapped by endless repetition and restlessness, and most of us are simply too exhausted and lack time and energy to read a good book and truly enjoy it. The question emerges: should we read at all? I think we should, because it can empower us. Reading never killed anyone. If you look at those people who left a trace in the world, you will see in almost all cases that they read many books. Napoleon once said, "Show me a family of readers, and I will show you the people who move the world." Reading can keep our mind in motion and can help us to attain independence and safeguard our freedom. I always loved reading, and I always read for myself, even if I read something obligatory. For me, opening a great book is an entrance into another world. It is also a meeting with the author, or a visit into the past or into a future that can be our present. If it is related to your life, reading can be about discovery and adventure. It can be more than a boring school exercise or a simple hobby. Maybe you say that, okay, we shouldn't give up reading, but how could we know what is important? How could we find it? And how we can do all of this in a hurrying world? Well, it is obvious that customary approaches are not effective anymore. The fact that our current life made them outdated is a blessing, because we need to experiment with alternatives. Focusing and decision-making became hard, and many of us are lacking that vigilance and endurance that are indispensable for finding valuable knowledge. If we would stick to old forms and methods, then the 21st century must appear as hostile to reading. But if we can move beyond rigid systems and customs, if we can invent our own solutions, and above all, if we read for ourselves, then it can be the most reader-friendly era in history. Okay. And what is the magic recipe that can bring this result? Well, I did not discover any secret formulas, but I have my own approach. For me, the first question is always, why do I read? I think this is far more important than everything else taken together. It means a lot to me what the book is about, how it relates to my life, what I know about it, or what I can do with its content. I always ask myself the following questions about a book. Who wrote it? Why? When? Where? Under what circumstances? What was the writer's relationship to his own world and his own time? Who criticized him and with what? Did he have any enemies? What was the afterlife of the work? Is the book mainstream or rare? Great thinkers and geniuses have their own tips as well. For example, Ralph Waldo Emerson offered 3 practical principles about reading. He suggested that we should never read any book that is not a year old, never read any but framed books, and never read any but what we like. Everyone can have his own rules, but according to Emerson, the best rule of reading will be a method from nature, and not a mechanical one of hours and pages. Once you learn to read, you will be forever free, said Frederick Douglass. Reading is a serious thing, because it is not simply about spelling letters, but we are thinking either with our own mind or with that of the author. or in the best cases with both. During reading, our mind meets with that of the author, so we cannot say that we are totally alone. This means that we are involved in a process that can be either beneficial or harmful for us. If we only want to think with our mind, then we close ourselves before any novelty. If we are too open, then we make a mistake again, because we are becoming uncritical, and we stop to think for ourselves. In the worst cases, it can happen that we read ourselves stupid. I know from experience that constant reading can be paralyzing. German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer confirms its harmful effects. Constant reading immediately taken up again in every free moment is even more mentally paralyzing than constant manual labor, since in the latter, we can still muse about our own thoughts. The more one reads, the fewer traces are left behind in the mind by what was read. It becomes like a tablet on which many things have been written over one another. When we read, we do not simply receive the same content, because perception doesn't flow from the object. If the opposite were the case, then everybody must have the same opinion. But we all see according to our own eye. Only the eye can be responsible for interpreting anything. In this sense, reading can be compared to seeing. If an object that you see doesn't simply exist, but you also need to evoke it in yourself, the same is the case with the content of a book. It is not within us, but it doesn't simply flow out of the book. It is the eye that needs to spell, study, and interpret it. Today, we still imagine that proper reading is about regular and constant reading, and we fail to understand that if we read too much or consume too much content on social media, then we simply don't leave enough time to process and evaluate information. Nothing will remain out of it, because we did everything to lose knowledge. What we are doing today with information resembles eating. We only assimilate a portion of our food, and the rest is lost through digestion, evaporation, and through other ways. With giving up reading, we are also giving up our powers and self, and we submit ourselves to the dogmas of others. In this case, your views and opinions will always be imposed on you by others. If you don't want this, then begin to read. By reading, you cannot acquire the exact qualities of a writer, but you have the possibility to develop your own by meeting with the example of another person. If you too have some talents, then a book, an article, and even a social media post can support their unfolding. I'm trying to avoid writings which are shallow imitations of past works, which are too repetitive and inauthentic. And I also say no to books about which it can be known that they are products of some scam. These will not aid our development in any way. Regarding the range of books, we have more options than ever. This is simultaneously a curse and a blessing. We can gain access to interesting and rare books, but we often forget that libraries or the internet not only preserve great books, but also the errors and lies of the past. Some of them can be quite alive in our present and can make a lot of noise, even if they are discredited. Bad books are poisonous, and unfortunately, we are ceaselessly bombarded with them. Among new arrivals, there are enormous numbers of books which desire our time and money, but they fail to deliver their promises. Instead of empowering us, they only rob the attention that by rights belongs to great books and their creators. These mass products were written merely with the aim of 1-minute fame and easy money. They only serve trends or want to condition you to do the same as what others do. Having books was always considered to be something elevated. The Roman Stoic philosopher Cicero was convinced that any room without books is like a body without a soul. Unfortunately, some people used to confuse the purchase and accumulation of these books with the assimilation of their content. You can have many books on your bookshelf, but this does not mean that you read all of them. They won't make you smarter or better. Nevertheless, they still believe that by decorating themselves with fancy books, they become smarter, while they fail to see how ridiculous they are. Despite this, weak books are not totally useless, but positively harmful, because we can always learn which books we should avoid. We can surely know what garbage is, because it is always written for quick results to a mass of potential consumers. We don't have to read them to know this. Okay, but what is a great book then? I always tell people that a book can be called great if it can help you to surpass yourself, and it can even fundamentally change your life by converting your consciousness. It should have a transformative effect. It should be unique, and it should contain the quintessence of its creator, whether it is excellent or junk. British poet John Milton said that a good book is the precious lifeblood of a master spirit. George Orwell believed that the best books are those that tell you what you know already. If we read a great book, and especially if we understand it, then we can feel the difference before reading it and after reading it. A great book is a fountain of wisdom and a way of transformation. Such a book is dangerous indeed. Nowadays, most of us can hardly tell what a great book is, because there are very few new great books, and even fewer people know about the great books of the past. We cannot make a difference between junk and value. We read the latest and most fashionable, and we don't look after classics and less-known contemporary books. We have too many books which can either be tasted with pleasure or devoured with pain. But we are lacking those which we should chew and digest thoroughly. If we buy books, we often exchange our precious time and money for nothing. Instead of robbing ourselves, we should turn to the works of the great minds of all times and peoples. Only they can really shape and aid us. In the age of Emerson, there was a similar shortage of transformative books. He suggests that if our times are sterile and genius, we must cheer us with books of rich and believing men who had atmosphere and amplitude about them. There are far more great books beyond those which are shown to us. When we buy and read books about cooking, sports, business, the great men of the past, religion or science, we forget to read books of people who are really doing those activities about which this or that author only wrote. All of this resembles to gossip that is never a first-hand information, and in most cases false. If you want to know about sports, read the books of real sportsmen. If you are interested in cooking, then read the books or watch the videos of real chefs. If you are fascinated by a great thinker, read his own works. If you feel inclined toward Buddhism, Christianity, or Taoism, then read the sayings of Buddha, the Bible, or the Tao Te Ching. The point is to find the original and basic source. And besides that, if you have enough time, read some secondary works. One well-read great book, worth 100 weak. The point is to use your time to read enduring literature, and not mass products which can never survive beyond the moment. Every enduring book worth reading should be read more than one time. If you can read it on paper and on tablet, and if you also listen to its audiobook, then its content can have a lasting impact, and you can become richer. In such cases, a book isn't a burden, but a pleasure. Such books are truly worth their price, and they can be memorable. Neither the fashions of the moment, nor the expectations of society, nor the traditions of the past can know better than we do which book is the best choice. They can only coat us with a thin glaze that always wears off quickly, because it was never ours. Instead of submitting to them, be bold, be curious, and never stop asking questions. Reading is one of the most powerful skills that you can have, since it enables you to be independent and to know other worlds. Never forget to investigate, discover, and struggle.